All right, so today we're diving into something pretty fascinating,
Yeah.
a legal saga that's been going on for quite a while now.
Right.
We're going to be taking a look at Amanda Knox's final appeal
Yeah.
in Italy, and this is specifically related to a slander conviction that has kind of lingered even after she was exonerated of the murder charge back in 2015.
Right.
I think a lot of people are really interested to see what's going to happen with this and to get some closure on this whole story.
Absolutely.
So that's what we're going to be unpacking today.
Yeah, this has been a story that's been going on for almost 2 decades now, right?
Oh, yeah.
Starting with the tragic murder of Meredith Kercher back in 2007.
Yeah, it's been a long road for Knox. I mean, going through those initial convictions and then the acquittals, appeals, back and forth.
Right.
But today we're really focusing on this slander charge, which
Right.
could be the last piece of this whole puzzle.
Yeah, it's really interesting because this particular charge is important because it stems from Knox accusing Patrick Lumbumba, her bar owner, employer at the time, under duress during those very early police interrogations.
Okay.
And, you know, even though he was released pretty quickly because he had such a solid alibi, the accusation had a lasting impact on his life
Oh, for sure.
and reputation.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a situation where even though she was exonerated from the murder, this slander conviction still kind of casts this shadow.
Exactly. And on top of that, the European Court of Human Rights actually ruled that Italy violated Knox's rights during those very early interrogations.
Oh, wow.
They said she was denied a lawyer and she was given an inadequate translator, which had a big impact on how things played out.
So that's a pretty major turning point, it sounds like.
Huge turning point because it really throws those initial statements that implicated Lumbumba into question.
Yeah.
So now the court is focusing on a handwritten letter from Knox where she actually tried to retract that accusation.
Okay.
And this letter is a key piece of evidence they're looking at very closely
Mm-hmm.
to determine if it actually constitutes slander or if it reflects just the chaotic and confusing circumstances of that interrogation.
It's got to be incredibly stressful for her, knowing that this one letter could be the deciding factor.
Absolutely. It adds a whole other layer of complexity
Mm-hmm.
to a situation that's already very complex.
Right.
And, you know, it's important to remember that this isn't just about legal technicalities. You know,
Yeah.
there are real people whose lives have been deeply affected by this whole ordeal.
Yeah. I mean, on her podcast, Labyrinth Knox talks about the emotional weight of living under this cloud of accusation.
Yeah.
She even describes the experience as horrific, personally,
Yeah.
psychologically, and emotionally. It's clear that this has taken a really big toll on her.
Of course. And we have to think about Patrick Lumbumba, too. He's been living with the consequences of that false accusation for all these years.
Right.
He was actually present at the court today, and he made a statement expressing the pain that he still carries all these years later,
Wow.
particularly the lack of an apology from Knox.
It's a reminder that even if the courts clear her name entirely, the emotional scars of this are going to linger for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely, for everyone involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really highlights the human cost of these accusations and just the long shadow they can cast, even when they're proven false.
Yeah, and thinking about that shadow, it's almost impossible to ignore the role of the media in this whole thing.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, the media frenzy surrounding this case was relentless. Do you think that level of scrutiny could have impacted the legal proceedings at all?
I think absolutely, especially for an American navigating a foreign legal system.
Right.
The media coverage was so intense and a lot of times sensationalized, and that definitely shaped public perception of Knox and the evidence.
Yeah.
It's hard to say for sure, but it's certainly possible that kind of attention could have influenced the initial investigation and maybe even the court proceedings.
It's interesting to think about because on the one hand, media attention can help expose flaws in the justice system. But on the other, it can also create this climate of prejudice where it's really difficult to have a truly fair trial.
It's a very delicate balance.
Yeah.
And this case, I think, really highlights that tension, between freedom of the press and the right to a fair trial. And that's even more complicated these days with social media.
Right.
Because opinions and information can spread so quickly.
And speaking of using media to shape narratives, Knox has been pretty actively engaging with the public through her podcast
Yeah.
advocacy work. It seems like she's really trying to reclaim her story and raise awareness about wrongful conviction.
Yeah, it's a really powerful example of how someone can use their platform to kind of challenge those perceptions and advocate for change, even after going through such a traumatic experience.
Yeah.
She's really become a voice for people who feel like they've been caught in the system unjustly.
Makes you wonder what she's going to share in her new memoir, Free. My search for meaning, I imagine she'll delve even deeper into the psychological and emotional impact of this whole 17-year saga.
I think so too. I think it'll offer some really valuable insights into her personal journey and how she's navigated this complex situation.
Right.
It's also a chance for her to reflect on those bigger questions about justice and accountability
Yeah.
and the power of telling your own story.
It's interesting to see how she's evolved from someone who was kind of caught in this media storm
Right.
to now someone who's using media to control her own narrative. So as we wrap up our deep dive into this captivating and controversial case, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from this conversation?
I'd say it's this. While the pursuit of justice is essential, it's very rarely black and white.
Yeah.
It's a nuanced and often imperfect process, and we have to approach these complex cases with a critical eye, a willingness to consider multiple perspectives, and a deep sense of compassion for everyone involved.
That's a powerful message to end on. This case is a reminder that justice isn't just about legal outcomes. It's about human lives, the search for truth, and the enduring struggle to find meaning and healing in the face of tragedy and injustice.